Hello, students. We're just going to discuss for a little while what makes Virginia Woolf so special and how she has contributed to literature. So, when you're looking at Virginia Woolf, we cannot escape these terms. We have to have a thorough understanding of what you see on screen about modern, what is modernity, and what is modernism. So, allow me to briefly explain this. When you're looking at modern, what we're looking at is uh, uh, the term refers to the rise of a nation state as well as science and rational thought as opposed to the previous era. And then when you're looking at modernity, this is a set of cultural, philosophical, and economic norms that arose in the modern period. And a growing emphasis on individualism is what we need to focus on. And when you're looking at modernism, we see it as a set of artistic and philosophical movements and principles that arose in Europe and in the US at the turn of the 20th century. So now that we have understood this as a background, to position the stream, what is stream of consciousness? So we're looking at stream of consciousness as an understanding. And when we a good way to understand stream of consciousness is to actually participate and try doing it. Like you can spend 5 minutes looking at nothing on screen, but learn to write as fast as you can. And then when you look at what you have written, you will understand what stream of consciousness actually, how it works. It is an honest reflection of our mind and the process of our mind. So when you're looking at stream of consciousness, what is it? It is a name applied specifically to a mode of narration that undertakes to reproduce without a narrator's intervention the full spectrum and continuous flow of a character's mental process, in which sense perceptions mingle with conscious and half-conscious thoughts, memories, expectations, feelings, and random associations. And when Virginia Woolf sought to use stream of consciousness, she used it to focus on the emotional and psychological processes that are taking place in the minds of one or more characters. And important character traits are revealed through an expression of what is exploration of what is going on in the mind. And she has used it very successfully in many of her works, especially Mrs. Dalloway also. And a quick definition to recall stream of consciousness is look at it as a stream of consciousness, as you can see the image on this on the screen. It's characterized by a flow of thoughts and images which may not always appear to have a coherent structure or cohesion. The plot line may weave in and weave out of time and place, carrying the reader through the lifespan of a character or further along a timeline to incorporate the lives and thoughts of characters from another time. So you see how plot itself can go forward with this. And also, when you're looking at Virginia Woolf, a quick biographical note, she was born in 1882. Most of her works shot to fame, especially To the Lighthouse and Mrs. Dalloway. She was part of the famous Bloomsbury group and she was an influential modern writer. She suffered occasionally from nervous episodes, and we have reason to believe that this was caused by the internal trauma and the horrific trauma that she underwent and the abuse that she underwent as a child. She was married in 1912 and is known as one of the foundational feminist figures, and she died in 1941. Her death itself was very tragic because it was fueled by childhood trauma, her parents' divorce, her father's remarriage, and she had many step siblings also. And though she was happily married, in her suicide note, she mentions how she just cannot go on and she did not want her husband to suffer because of her trauma, and she drowned herself in a river nearby. This is actually a newspaper cutting of the announcing the death of Virginia Woolf. But today we would like to focus and celebrate on her life. So as Virginia Woolf defines a feminist is any woman who tells the truth about her life. What she means is to be able to speak honestly about her life is what defines a feminist. And yes, it is important that we also spend some time understanding who and what this Bloomsbury group is. So the Bloomsbury Group was a group of writers, intellectuals, philosophers, and artists who held informal discussions in Bloomsbury. And this collective friends and relatives lived, worked, and studied in Bloomsbury in London during the first half of the 20th century. And they were, some of them were E.M. Forster, Leon Strachey, J.M. Keynes, and you can actually see pictures of this Bloomsbury group meeting and talking and discussing. Their work influenced literature, aesthetics, criticism, and economics, as well as modern attitudes towards feminism, pacifism, and sexuality. It's apart from those notable members, we also have Clive Bell, who is an art philosopher, Leonard Woolf, novelist and journalist, and he is the one who married Virginia in 1912, and they founded the Hogarth Press, in which they published a lot of landmark works, literary works, and Edgar E.M. Foster, of course, and Roger Fry. Virginia Woolf also contributed a lot to the psychological novel, while modernist poetry arose as a break with the 19th century romanticism. Modernist fiction represented a trend drifting away from the tradition of 19th century realism. Modernist fiction put emphasis on the description of the character's psychological activities, and so has sometimes been called modern psychological fiction. So how did Woolf innovate in this background? She experimented with storytelling. So in Mrs. Dalloway especially, we see how a woman's whole life is explained within the confines of a single day. And in that novel, we see 2 days, 10 years apart, tell the story of those 10 years and all the many actions and the consequences of those 10 years. So she uses stream of consciousness very powerfully in Mrs. Dalloway. And this style is also has something we call impressionistic writing. So what is impressionistic writing? It comes from the word impressionism, which is a depiction of scene, emotion, or character by details intended to achieve a vividness or effectiveness by evoking subjective or sensory impressions than by recreating an objective reality. And that is a new and it's been characterized as a new style, and actually this is a newspaper cutting of a new novel written in this impressionistic style, announcing that. Yeah. So Woolf is also known for something she called the tunneling technique, in which she herself called it the tunneling technique, in which she makes characters recall past events. And in experiencing these characters' recollections, readers derive for themselves a sense of background and history to what the characters underwent. It is, in effect, takes place of what a character would have had to provide. And instead of creating major situations in which a narrator would have to provide these details, she takes us into the mind of the characters and creates situations to push the story forward. And Woolf moved her narrative by following passing hours of the day, and the book is composed of movements from one character to another, movements from internal thoughts of one character to the internal thoughts of another. And a room of one's own, which is what we are majorly dealing with and focusing on today, is a testament for the women's feminist movement. And it has become a feminist classic. It has generated immense debate among both feminist and non-feminist scholars and critics who have shown great interest in this exploratory text, A Room of One's Own. And it is still remains influential today because it addresses fundamental issues relating to women writers and the material and social conditions under which they produce and perhaps still continue to produce, with the conditions having changed much. And Room of One's Own explores a woman's position in fiction and in real life. It is a critique of patriarchal society and it is a struggle for women's rights. I would like to mention at this point three important quotes from A Room of One's Own. A woman must have money and a room of her own if she is to write fiction. And so long as you write what you wish to write, that is all that matters. And whether it matters for ages or only for us, nobody can see. And who shall measure the heat and violence of the poet's heart when caught and entangled in a woman's body? So these three quotes might give you an idea of what A Room of One's Own actually is all about. And this is also another important quote about from Virginia Woolf in the novel Mrs. Dalloway. What does the brain matter compared with the heart? And this reminds us of D.H. Lawrence thought and ideas also, in which he says, what is he practically says the same thing in many of his novels. And many of his novels have this message. What does the brain matter compared with the feelings of the heart? And many of us might be aware that Shakespeare played a huge role in Virginia Woolf's writing. Many appearances of Shakespeare we find, especially in poetry. She uses Shakespeare's plays and sonnets as a way to explore themes such as love, death, and the passage of time. And it is today we see this very well represented in the movie The Hours, where we see the actual character of Virginia Woolf, the actual character of Mrs. Dalloway, and a modern representation of Mrs. Dalloway. All three lives of these women entangled as one narrative in this powerful movie called The Hours. So when you're looking at A Room of One's Own, it is often hailed as a feminist Bible, and it is an expansion of her lecture, actually, which she gave on the title Women and Fiction. And she gave this lecture in Cambridge University, in two women's colleges related to Cambridge University, on the 20th and 26th of October, 1928. And the title is very significant because it's also, the literal meaning is a woman, if she has to write, needs space and money, and also the symbolic meaning, as a woman, if she has to write, she needs freedom and autonomy. And this was first published in 1929 as a book with 6 chapters. But we, of course, will be dealing with only the 3rd chapter. It's an excerpt. And when I look at the introduction, it talks about women's lack of free self-expression and how she goes through history. And when she looks through history, she finds so little data about the everyday lives of women, and she laments and questions this lack of authentic fact about women's real lives. And she looks at historians like G.M. Trevelyan, who wrote History of England, and women are practically invisible. They appear only marginally in official history. If you were to take G.M. Trevelyan's landmark book, History of England, as official history. Yeah, so she particularly deals with women in literature, women in history, and women in literatures. So when you combine all this, in literature we see women loom large, vibrant, full of personality. We see them as Cleopatra, Lady Macbeth, Rosalind, Desdemona, Duchess of Malfi, Anna Karenina, Emma Bovary. We see all of them in literature. But in fact, in history, women were locked up, beaten, and flung about the room, denied choice in marriage, illiterate, and confined. And only queens like Elizabeth and Mary appear ordinary and out of the invisible. And she tells us how she finds increasingly little data about the everyday lives of women in history. And she makes a call that we have to supplement this history by doing adequate research into women's marriages, education, domestic life, childbearing, work, and whether they have a room of their own, whether they have a space of their own, and suggests that feminist historiography, she suggested this decades before it became an academic discipline, and we can thank her for this foresight and thought. And she also talks about Judith Shakespeare as an alter imaginative character from whom, if there was a Judith Shakespeare, what are the levels of achievement she would have reached, and how the scenario of that time made it so that she had to kill herself because she was abused and traumatized by the environment that she found herself in, and her genius was killed, of course. And then we conclude, and Virginia concludes by saying that women need economic independence, and only then they would be able to write. And to change women's lives, she said that women, of course, are capable of to write, but if we have to change the lives of women and give them a voice of their own, then the social conditions of their environment should also change. And thus she concludes, to change women's fiction, women's material and social lives must also change. So this, of course, thank you for joining me for this small segment which talks about Virginia Woolf, her contribution, her role as a feminist, and this landmark text, A Room of One's Own, and how it gives us signposts to take us forward in this academic discipline of women's historiography. Thank you very much.